I want to start off by saying that the 13th of October 2006 was one of the absolutely worst days of my life. Then Labor politician Eddie Obeid successfully sued my colleague Ann Davies and I for suggesting, well, that he was corrupt. Now, outside court, Eddie's solicitor, Mark O'Brien, said snidely that he hoped the Fairfax press would get their stories right in future. Now, just as an aside, Mark O'Brien's more recent clients have not been so successful. They include Ben Roberts-Smith and Bruce Lehrmann, who foolishly came back for seconds. Or as Justice Lee put it more eloquently, having escaped the lion's den, Mr. Lehrmann made the mistake of going back for his hat. But anyway, back to me and my misery. I seriously thought that I'd never be able to write about Eddie Obeid again, having humiliatingly lost the defamation action. And I'd been writing about his suspect deal since 1999. That is 25 years ago. Now, over those years, I uncovered all manner of allegations of dodgy developments, tax fraud, insurance fraud, cronyism. The list goes on and on. But one thing that really interested me was Eddie Obeid's bad luck with fires. Now, Eddie Obeid's nickname in the Lebanese community was Sparky, because of all the blazes at his premises. Now, there were 2 fires in Eddie Obeid's printing presses, and another one was the very famous offset Alpine fire, which was reinsured for a remarkable amount of money just before the fire. And then there were 2 fires in Eddie Obeid's houses. I mean, how unlucky can you be? But there was a stroke of good fortune when disaster was averted in the Obeid's lovely function centre, the Bellevue. It's on the 2nd floor of a building in Restful Street, Bankstown. Believe you me, I've been there. So the stroke of good fortune was that the tobacconist on the ground floor noticed petrol dripping through his ceiling. And he called the police. Now, I remember at the time asking Eddie Obeid about this terrible misfortune, and he explained that it was an attempted petrol bombing instigated by an unsuccessful entrant in a Lebanese beauty pageant, which was held at the centre. I mean, who would have thought beauty queens could have sidelines as a would-be arsonist? But there must have been more beauty queens on the Rantan, as there were 2 more attempts to burn down the Bellevue Function Centre. Anyway, having initially thought that I could never write about the Obeids again, as I said, for our defamation problems, I went back for seconds. Now, in 2012, Moses Obeid, one of Eddie's 5 sons, was sitting in the witness box in the Supreme Court, and now he was wondering which lie to tell. Should he lie to the court now, or should he confess that he'd previously lied to his bank manager? Now, on this occasion, as I'm sitting there, I actually felt sorry for the Obeids, because wherever they were, there was I. Back in March 2004, I'd popped into court as Eddie's son, Gerard, was accused of neg driving, occasioning grievous bodily harm as he'd run over a pedestrian in Oxford Street in peak hour traffic. But on this occasion, much to my shock, now this is, after Eddie Obeid has currently got legal action against me, he asked me to join he and Gerard and their barrister, Charlie Waterstreet, for coffee. So I, of course, say, yes, I'd love to do that. So we sit down and we're chatting away, and then he invites me to Sunday lunch at Passy. This is the mansion in Hunters Hill. And I replied, my food taster and I would be honoured to come. But I don't actually think he got my joke, because he then offered me a job as his official biographer. saying he would pay handsomely for my services. I was honoured, I said, honoured to be offered this, but I then offered up Charlie Waterstreet as a far better writer of fiction. But again, I don't think Eddie got the difference. But anyway, but funnily enough, since then, Waterstreet has been reprimanded for making factual assertions without any evidence at a trial. He's been accused of sexually harassing young female employees, and in 2019 he was struck off. But having said that, Charlie Waterstreet is in a slightly better place than Eddie Obeid's lawyer, Savag Shalabian. Now, he helped disguise the $30 million they got for the corrupt coal deal, but he certainly went back for seconds because he's now doing 12 years for washing $24 million in blackmail money linked to the Plutus payroll scam. So, bad luck. But anyway... Another encounter I had with Eddie was via the phone. Now, I'd rung Eddie Obeid's press secretary and I'd rung her mobile phone, and it was to put questions to Eddie about another unflattering story that I was doing. But the problem was she forgot to hang up. So I took notes for 20 minutes about how evil I was, how they were going to fob me off, what lies they were going to tell. So I rang back on the office number and I said, look, as much as I would love to listen to your fascinating scheming courtesy of your mobile phone you inadvertently left on, I do have a story to write. So if you'd like to give me some of the quotes you were planning to do, all I heard was, oh, fuck. And the line went dead. There was no more quotes. But anyway, back to the lies of another member of the Obeid family, Moses Obeid. Now, I mentioned that he was back in the witness box being grilled, of all things, about multi-function street poles. You know, I said I'm always there for the Obeids, even a street pole case, there I am. So, Moses had been ordered to pay the City of Sydney Council $12 million after his company Streetscape had been sprung secretly selling the council's smart poles overseas without owning the intellectual property rights. And this made me laugh. Moses told the court he was just as shocked as the council to learn that a company that just happened to be called Streetscape International and was run by his cousin was doing these shifty deals. Moses had no idea, he said. Of course, the court didn't buy any of this, and Moses and his company were ordered to pay the $12 million. But then Moses, you've got to give it to the Obeids. There's always a scheme. So what does he do? He puts Streetscape into administration. And the company's multi-million-dollar debt to the council was wiped out after smaller creditors, who included Moses' family, his friends, and his associates, outvoted the council, saying they were happy to accept 1 cent in the dollar for their debts. Now, having pulled that swifty, Moses went back for seconds. Here he was in the witness box trying to avoid having to personally cough up the money. And by now, with the interest payments growing, it was $16 million. Now, poor Moses told the court that he had no money to pay. His taxable income was $100,000, and his former hairdresser wife, Nikki, was earning $80,000. Now, by the way, she once had a hair salon called Hairlarious. And I know, hilarious, really. But I often wondered that her husband's family was of no use whatsoever because they were all follically challenged. Anyway, the council hired forensic auditors, and their discoveries revealed that Moses and Nikki Obeid were miracles of modern finance. Here they were on a combined taxable income of $180,000, and they were driving his and hers Range Rovers, employing a maid, meeting their mortgage repayments of $240,000 a year, and spending another $500,000 a year on expenses. No wonder Justice Peter Young said that the Obeids exemplified a saying from Thackeray's Vanity Fair: How to Live Well on Nothing a Year. Now, in dismissing Moses's claim that he had no money and couldn't pay, Justice Young said the evidence before the court showed that Mr. and Mrs. Obeid had very few personal assets and limited income, yet they were living very well indeed. They were living, this is the judge's words, they were living in a superior suburb, Vaucluse, which Mrs. Obeid acquired for $4.5 million in 2010, he said. Now, funnily enough, this prompted me to do my own searches, which revealed that in the previous year, the Obeid children, and there's 9 of them, had all bought new houses worth millions of dollars each. Now, something really fishy was going on. Where were all these millions coming from? Now, one of those who bought a house was Jared Obeid. Jared for the bad driver. And Jared, apart from being a bad driver, even though he is the family driver, it's not the sharpest tool in the shed. And at a later ICAC inquiry, Commissioner David Ip asked Jared how he'd got $2.5 million to buy his house when his occupation was the family driver. And Jared replied, "It was in the bank, Your Honour." And pushed to explain how the money had got into the bank, Jared said rather forlornly, "I've got no idea." The tooth fairy, suggested the Commissioner irritably, but when Jared looked blank, the Commissioner softened a tad. "You go through life without bothering about things like this. You leave it to somebody else to make sure that you have enough to live on, and you're happy with that," asked the Commissioner. Exactly, Your Honour. "I have no idea how this works," said Jared. But anyway, back to the street polls. So when Moses Obeid's financial affairs were tendered before Justice Young in the court, I applied to see them. And of course the Obeids objected, saying what a dreadful person I was and I would only make mischief with their documents. I mean, they were right. But I represented myself. And I argued the public had a right to know what was in the documents. And McClymont SC emerged victorious. Now, no wonder the Obeids had fought to keep them a secret, as I actually remember running back to the office, waving these documents, saying, "We've got them! We've finally got them!" Because in order to obtain the loan for their house, Moses had told the bank that he had assets and shares in the family companies that were worth $11 million. There were secret ownerships of the Circular Quay cafes, financial links to the people who'd bought the farms next to the Obeids at the Bylong Valley. And in the previous 2 years, $800,000 had flown into Moses's bank account from a family trust flush with $30 million. Now, in the end, the City of Sydney Council did not get a cent from Moses Obeid, but inadvertently they got so much more, because armed with the documents, my colleagues and I wrote and wrote and wrote. And then ICAC stepped up to the plate, and a cast of people who'd featured in Moses Obeid's documents were called to give evidence. This one was my favourite. His name was Rocco Trilcho, and he was one of the creditors at Streetscape. He did sound like when he was giving evidence that he'd been gargling rocks for breakfast. Yeah. Anyway, Rocco and his brother Rosario, they really were like Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. And they had the ICAC courtroom in absolute stitches as they tried to explain why they had bought a farm right next to the Obeids in the Bylong Valley, which just happened to be where a coal mine might be. So not only did they not even know the name of their own farm, you buy a farm, you don't even know its name, but they couldn't quite explain to why they had hidden the ownership of the farm in their accountant's name. "Would you have run goats or rats or cows?" asked counsel assisting, trying to establish what agricultural intentions the pair had for the farm. Rosario said he assumed there wasn't going to be rats. "Not four-legged ones," said the Commissioner sardonically. Now, another Obeid mate who'd also bought a neighbouring farm, he told the inquiry he'd always wanted to run a farm. But then he admitted he had not bought a single cow or any feed, no farming equipment. And when asked what kind of cattle he planned to run, he replied, the kind that walk and eat grass. The kind that walk and eat grass. And of farming in general, Justin Lewis said, to my way of thinking, how hard could it be? Now, Moses Obeid's decision to come back for seconds in that street pole case ultimately resulted in Moses going to jail, and his dad, Eddie, he got 2 stints. The first was for the secret cafe lease, and his second jail term was for the Mount Penny coal deal, which reaped his family $30 million. But guess what? Eddie has another criminal trial looming next year, so he might even be coming back for thirds. Thank you.
Kate McClymont!